I want to start by saying thank you for your prayers, thank you for your messages, thank you for your support, thank you for your food. While I've been taking some time off and getting a new kidney. The kidney's going great. I'm going great. So it is really nice to be here. And also want to thank you for giving me and the family a few months just to have the op and recover and get back into life. That's been really appreciated, and it's been a real blessing, and it's helped a lot. But that said, it's nice to be here, and it's nice to be with you, and it's good to be going through this series. Someone wise once said, "Tell me your phobias, and I'll tell you what you're afraid of." Sorry. So, what are you afraid of? What do you fear? Spiders? There's one. Thanks for being honest, Di. Snakes? Thanks, Di, again. Sharks? Coriander? Julie? Yep. Sam, nice. Drinking off milk? You are now. So, yeah. Who's afraid of heights? Yep. This is probably my biggest fear, which is ironic because I grew up in Hong Kong and everything there is in heights. Like, you live in heights, you shop in heights. I grew up on the 8th floor of an apartment building, looking out the window, and yet here I am afraid of heights. But yeah, I get up high and look down and kind of, you know that feeling you get in your tummy? It's kind of like gurgly and your legs kind of go weak and jelly-y and you're like, oh man, need to walk away and just get back down to low ground. Here's some other fears, and I want to see if you can guess what these are. Fear of the thing not working. All right, Grace, can you help us out? The first one is Nozocomophobia. Any guesses? Fear of having no nose. It's the fear of hospitals. And following on from that, perhaps fear of needles. Anyone? All right, what about this one? Ergophobia. Any guesses? And I know you're Greek. Big cities, not quite. Fear of neatness, not quite. Some of you, open spaces, no. Some of you might actually connect with this. Anyone? Anyone? Yeah. No one's going to put their hand up. All right, what about, yeah. What about this one? Fear of the end? Yep. I'm surprised because I actually made that up. But you all know what it is, so maybe it shouldn't be made up. Maybe it should be a real thing. I'm going to say it's the fear of revelation and the fear of end times and the fear of just what might happen. While this isn't a technical thing, maybe it might be in a few years if some psychologist gets onto it. I grew up with this. Anyone else? We hear about Revelation and we think, oh man, it's just doom and gloom and difficult. And I grew up praying that I wouldn't have to live through it. Because I don't want to go through that. Like it's nasty. It's just all bad news by the sounds of it. And I'd go to a Revelation seminar as they used to hold them, and I'd hear about it and I'd go, oh man, that's scary. I guess I better follow God because that sounds really nasty and I don't want to go through that. And the problem by that is it's almost a conversion by fear, isn't it? Like, you make a choice because you don't want to experience what happens if you don't make the choice. It's not making a choice for the sake of the choice itself. So, we're going through a series at the moment, And we're looking at this passage in Revelation chapter 14. And it's part of the three angels' message, as it's widely known, or might be titled in your Bible. So if you've got your Bible, open up to Revelation chapter 14. And last week, Jared looked at this and he gave us kind of a bit of a summary of what this is all about. So there's three angels, and these three angels have these three messages for the whole world. And it's to every tribe, nation, language, and people. And a message or a messenger, an angel is actually, the word for angel is the same as messenger. So an angel is someone who's delivering a message. And Jared pointed out last week that if you choose to follow Jesus, then you are also jumping on with the angels as someone who is a messenger. You're a messenger who brings good news to people. And last week, Jared looked at the eternal gospel. Do you remember what kind of the point of that is? What is the eternal gospel? Anyone remember from last week? I'm going to press this button and pretend I didn't. Anyone remember from last week? The gospel is the story of Jesus. It's what he's done. It's the good news that comes through him and because of what he has done for us. And Jared showed how the gospel reveals who God is, what God is like, and how that counteracts the lies that Satan often throws our way. And so God invites us into a relationship with him because the gospel makes that possible and shows us what that looks like. So, with that kind of introduction, the next thing to ask is, why does this happen here? I mean, isn't the gospel, if the gospel's such good news, shouldn't it come at the beginning of the book, not right in the middle? And it kind of does come throughout Revelation, but this is where it's really clearly unpacked. And I love the positioning of it in this book because it comes just after chapter 13, which is ironic because it's chapter 14, but it also comes just before the return of Jesus. And why that matters is because in chapter 13, if you've read through Revelation before, chapter 13, we're introduced to these two beasts. And these beasts represent kingdoms, and basically these kingdoms are about fear, coercion, control. This is kind of Satan's way to try and get the world on his side and get them to follow him. And his methods are pretty dubious, pretty sus, and don't give you much choice. And so in response to that, we have chapter 14, and we have these messages from the angels, which are God's response to what Satan's doing. Satan spreads his lies. He does it through control. He uses force. And really, chapter 13 is about him slandering God's name, flinging mud at God, trying to make it stick. And so in chapter 14, God's saying, okay, world, you've seen Satan's side. Let me show you my side. And it's about truth. It's about his love. It's about the freedom of choice that everyone has. And it's the gospel. It's good news as opposed to what I grew up hearing, which made me think of bad news. So we have that. And that sets the scene for what comes next. So it says in Revelation 14, "Then I saw another angel flying in midair, and he had the eternal gospel to proclaim to those who live on the earth, to every nation, tribe, language, and people." But that's not all of it. It goes on. He said in a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come." Who's heard those words before? Yeah. Who's read them? Okay. Why do we have to fear God? Does it mean we should be afraid of God? Does it mean that the good news that we just heard about maybe isn't such good news after all? Because, well, fear doesn't seem very loving, does it? And conversion by fear is pretty much coercion, isn't it? Like, there's no choice in that unless you want to go with the stuff you're afraid of. And most people probably wouldn't choose that. It seems like if we're supposed to be afraid of God, then that's kind of like a God, hey, I want you to love me, but in order to do that, I want you to be afraid of me or afraid of the options, what happens if you don't love me. And that seems twisted. That seems kind of wrong. And it seems like that should belong in chapter 13, not in chapter 14. So what does it actually mean when it says, fear God? To understand something in the Bible, one of the best things to do, if the word doesn't make sense, what do? You look for other places in the Bible where that word is used and figure out, okay, what do they mean by this? What's the connotation of this word? So here's a snapshot of where this word is used in the Bible. Deuteronomy, fear only the Lord your God. Okay? Joshua, saying, now fear God and serve him in sincerity and truth. Job, this guy we all know who was blameless and upright, he feared God, but what else did he do? He shunned evil. Okay? So fearing God and not liking evil seem to be opposites. What else have we got? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. You might have heard that one before. What about this one? The fear of the Lord leads to life. And then this one in Isaiah is actually interesting because this is a prophecy about Jesus. And it says, the Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of the knowledge and fear of the Lord. And it goes on to say that he, Jesus, will delight in the fear of the Lord. So we're starting to get a picture here of what fear may be or what it may not be. What I want to do is I want to explore a passage in the Bible that looks at this and I think illustrates what it means to fear the Lord. And that's in Deuteronomy chapter 5. So I want to invite you to go there. If you have your Bibles, I will have it on the screen as well. Deuteronomy is kind of like Moses' memoirs. It's like his autobiography. And in there, he kind of recounts the story of him and the Israelites and what happened between them and God and the escape and moving towards Canaan and walking through the desert and all that stuff. And so in this story that he writes, he recounts what happens when the Ten Commandments were given. So Deuteronomy 5 is the other place in the Bible where we get the Ten Commandments. And they are given to Moses. And we're going to pick up the story after the Ten Commandments, just after they've been given. So let's read. So he goes to the people and he says, these are the commandments the Lord proclaimed in a loud voice to your whole assembly there on the mountain from out of the fire, the cloud, and the deep darkness. He added nothing more. And then he wrote them on the 2 stone tablets and gave them to me. When you heard the voice out of the darkness, while the mountain was ablaze with fire, all the leaders of your tribes and elders came to me, and you said, the Lord our God has shown us his glory and his majesty, and we have heard his voice from the fire. Today we have seen that a person can live even if God speaks with them. Sounds good. But now, why should we die? This great fire will consume us, and we will die if we hear the voice of the Lord our God any longer. So go near and listen to all that the Lord our God says, then tell us whatever the Lord our God tells you. And then he goes on. The Lord heard you when you spoke to me, and the Lord said to me, I've heard what this people said to you. Everything they said was good. And then there's this one sentence from God which helps us understand what it means to fear him. Oh, that their hearts would be inclined to fear me and keep all my commands always, so that it might go well with them and their children forever. So how did the people respond to God's presence being there with them? They're freaked out. They're like, we can't survive this if this happens any longer. We can't be in God's presence because this is going to end bad for us. We're all going to die. And how did God respond? These people seem freaked out and afraid, and God says, oh, that they would fear me. I just want them to fear me. So it can't mean that we should be afraid of God, can it? Surely not, because God's just said that. If he wanted us to be afraid of him, well, they were already at that point. He didn't need to do any more. But he says, no, I want them. I want them to fear me. So what does it actually mean to fear God? I think the passage kind of helps us. Oh, that their hearts would be inclined to fear me and keep all my commandments. Jesus took that idea and expanded on it and helped us understand what it means a little bit more. If you love me, keep my commands. So how do you keep his commands? You think about them. You remember them. You think about how you can live them out in your day. You obey them. So to obey God's commands, I want to go back one slide. Is this a one-off event or is this continuous? What do you think? Is this one-off or is this something that goes on? Yeah, it goes on. If you love me, keep my commands. One-off or continuous? It's continuous. Okay. Look back at this list of verses. Are they one-off or is that continuous? The fear of the Lord leads to life. That's continuous. Fear of the Lord is the beginning. It's not complete wisdom, it's the beginning of wisdom. That's continuous. The church lived in the fear of the Lord and was encouraged by the Holy Spirit. That's continuous. So, in this verse, it was the same. Can I suggest that the fear of the Lord is to live in the constant awareness of his personal presence in your life? It's to live with this continual understanding that in every moment that I live, in every situation that I'm in every experience I encounter, God is here with me in this moment. I don't know if, Sam and Jess. So these guys recently got engaged. We're excited. So, Sam, I want to ask you a question. You don't have to answer loud. It can be rhetorical if you want it to be. It doesn't have to be. Do you think about Jess much? Okay, we're going not rhetorical. This is good. Do you... Okay, that's good as well. Do you think about the next time you're going to see her when you're apart? Do you think about her while you're working or studying? You don't have to. This isn't like a marriage ceremony where you have to say yes every time. You can. Would it be fair to say that you live in fear of Jess? That may want to be rhetorical, I'm not sure. But see, when we normally think of fear, we think afraid. But this is different. This kind of fear is, I want to be with you. I think about you all the time. When we're not together, I want to be where you are. This is a kind of fear that is about a constant awareness of that person's presence or their influence in your life. It's about God's goodness and thinking in it and reveling in it. It's about his compassion. It's about remembering the things he's done and thanking him for that. It's just about being in that moment with him. Now this all sounds good, but I think the reality is some of us might on the surface want to live like this, but deep down, there's still a bit of the other kind of fear of God. There's a little bit of that fear that says, I know he's good, I know that he loves me, but what happens if I stuff up? Like, because if I do, man, he's going to come after me. Or something's going to happen, and it's going to show that maybe he doesn't love me, that he's not as good as I thought he was. And then where do I go with that? Like, when bad stuff happens, what does that mean about God? And I think that's real. And if you're thinking that, that's okay. But I guess one warning I want to give you is, if you live with that kind of fear of God, it can drive you towards making sure that you're trying to tick all the boxes. And when you're trying to tick all the boxes, it's not really about who he is, it's more about what you're trying to do. And you're afraid, look, if I don't get that box ticked, then man, maybe God's not gonna love me. And the reality is, maybe it is that you just don't trust him. And there's no joy there. And there's certainly no peace there. And I dare say that's not eternally good news. So how do you know? How can you tell if you have a good fear of God or a bad fear of God, I guess? When I was looking into this and researching, I came across something Ty Gibson said. And he said, you can tell your view of God by how you respond when you mess up. Does it have you running towards God or away from him? Because if you're running away from him, there's probably a good chance that you don't really trust him. But if you run towards him, you run that way because you know that he is good, that he is gracious, that he does forgive, and he wants to forgive, and he will forgive if you're willing to head in that direction towards him. And I think, really, if you're running away from God, my guess is it might be that maybe you don't trust that he's actually got your back. That he doesn't know you, that he doesn't care about you, that he doesn't love you. And it might even be that you think he's a pretty nasty kind of guy. That he's more like the Revelation 13 God than the Revelation 14 God. But there's good news. Because if you think that, there are ways that you can get to know him, that you can get to understand what he's like, that you can live with the constant awareness of his personal presence in your life. And I want to suggest two things, two ways that you can do this. And you might, as we go through this, you might think, hey, this is a little bit simplistic. Probably is. I'm a simple guy. But often, obedience is simple. It's not complicated. So, what can you do to fear God? Can I suggest, first of all, get to know him? Simple? Yeah, very simple. At the moment in Tahiti, there's a surf comp going on. Anyone know what it might be? I think Jared does. Chopu? Yes? So Chopu is this... it's this break in Tahiti where you've got really deep ocean and it comes up really quickly onto a coral reef. So it's brutal. Like, water's shallow, but they're expecting a pretty huge swell. I think it's Tuesday or Wednesday next week, which means that these waves are 12, 14 foot, massive barrels, a huge chunk of water driving it, and it creates these beautiful waves that are amazing to watch people surf, but you could not pay me enough money to try it. Because if you mess up, oh man, there's a nice jagged reef waiting to eat you up. One of the guys who, I guess, kind of pioneered surfing at Chopu was a guy called Laird Hamilton. And this was a photo, I think, back in 2008. That's why it's blurry, because they didn't have HD back then. But Laird he's been a big wave surfer his whole life. And so he's done these crazy spots with these crazy waves. And one of the things he said was, if you don't understand the wave, you can't respect it. And I think back to our story in Deuteronomy 5 of Moses and the Israelites. And Moses didn't seem afraid of God. Did he? Like, you read through his story, you read through Exodus, Deuteronomy. Moses, you don't get the sense that Moses was afraid of approaching God, afraid of being with God, afraid of talking with God, of interacting with him. You get the sense that he knows God, so he's comfortable with him. But what's the difference between Moses and the people? It seemed like Moses was close, he knew God, whereas the rest of the people, look, sort of, sometimes, maybe, but definitely not as close as Moses. He knew God, they sort of did. C.S. Lewis, who wrote Chronicles of Narnia, there's this scene where the 4 kids are in Narnia and they get invited to the Mr. and Mrs. Beaver's home for a meal. Do you remember this? And they're ducking to get through things. But they're there, and Mr. Beaver is getting really excited because he knows what's going on. And he's talking to the 4 kids, and he mentions Aslan is on the move. And Susan says, "Who's Aslan?" And Mr. Beaver goes on to explain who Aslan is. He says, Aslan is a lion, the great lion. And Susan says, ooh, I thought he was a man. Is he quite safe? I shall feel rather nervous meeting a lion. Safe, said Mr. Beaver. Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe, but he's good. He's the king, I tell you. Now, what's the difference between those two? Mr. Beaver, he doesn't seem afraid of Aslan. Susan does seem afraid of Aslan. Susan was afraid of Aslan because she didn't know him, but Mr. Beaver wasn't afraid because he did. And I think this is the beautiful thing about connecting fearing God and the eternal gospel. Because if you're afraid of God, if you're afraid of anything, what's the way to overcome it? You face it. You get to know it. You get comfortable with it. You learn the way so you can respect it. You can't trust someone that you're afraid of and that you don't know. But what did Jesus come to do? He came to show us God. If you know me, you know the Father. So he came to give us a picture of what God is like and who he is. And Jesus came with a perfect love. And what does perfect love do? Perfect love casts out fear. Perfect love says, hey, fear doesn't belong here. Perfect love says, you don't need to be afraid of this. Perfect love says, whatever you knew about God, as you understand me and get to know my love, that fears. It's going to go because it just can't live in the same space. So the good news of the gospel dispels fear. So I want to encourage you to get to know God, but also practice being in his presence. God isn't limited to time. He's not limited to space. He doesn't sleep. He is wherever. He is everywhere. He is anywhere. He's ready to hear your complaints, your joys, your concerns, any time of the day or night. The challenge is for us to remember that. So here are 3 things that you can do to become more aware of God's presence in your life. And also, I think, 3 surprises that come when you do it. So the first one is to pray for others. Generally, there are 30 days in a month. I know some of you are going to say February doesn't have, that's right. So 30 days usually in most months. I want to invite you to come up with 30 names of people that you can pray for. 1 person a day. It's pretty simple. And you could decide to take this to the next level and not just pray for them, but send them a text or give them a phone call and say, hey, can I pray with you and for you? How does this help? It's amazing how often praying for somebody connects you to God and his heart. And that's the surprise you get when you pray for other people. There's something that happens inside where you realize, man, yeah, God, you're good. Yeah, God, you're doing stuff. And even if you don't see prayers answered the way you hope, what you do see is the concerns that God has and that he places on your heart. And that's getting to know him and what matters to him. Second thing you can do is remember. Commit to reading 3 chapters of the Bible a day. Just 3. You can probably do it, depending on how fast you read, in 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. But as you read those 3 chapters, write down a promise or a command that jumped out of that for you. And as you do that, commit to remembering it during the day. You can either repeat it or you can try and obey it as you go about your day. And the surprising thing is how often God speaks to you through that. You might want to put a reminder on your phone, or if you want to next level it and you're an overachiever, call somebody and say, hey, this is what I'm doing today. Can you check in with me later on, see how it went? Third thing you can do is repeat. Choose a Bible verse that means a lot to you at this moment, at this season in your life. And once you've chosen it, commit it to memory and repeat it. Repeat it during the day. Repeat it as you're going about your work. Repeat it as you're traveling. Repeat it as you're brushing your teeth. Whatever you're doing, just keep repeating this verse throughout your day. After a week or two, you might want to choose a different one, or you might want to stay with that one. It's up to you. There's no rules here. But the surprise that comes is how often that verse seems to be just the right one for what you're going through, or perhaps what somebody you bump into is going through. But if you're able to remember and keep it in your head, then it's a lot easier to share it with somebody if you run into them. And you can just have a very brief interaction with them, but that is an opportunity to practice being in God's presence as you are a messenger, an angel, a bearer of good news for them. I want to finish on that story in Deuteronomy, because I read what God said. Oh, that they would fear me. It's almost like this deep plea of a God who loves and wants to be in their lives and be the center of their lives, but he's really struggling to get their response. He's really struggling to get them to draw into that. And so he's doing all that he can to woo them in. I think of that and I imagine God just kind of saying, I want to be your everything. I want to be the one you think about when you get up. I want to be the one you walk with throughout your day. I want to be the one you complain to, the one you say, hey, God, guess what happened? I want to hear your stories. I want to be the one that hears first from you. And I want to be the one that gets to look on you as you go about your day and see the little smile come up on your face when you capture the little gifts that I've left for you. I want to be the one that gets to smile and tell all of heaven when they see you just do a little simple act of obedience. I want to be that one for you. I want to be your God. I want to be great in your life and show that greatness to you. That's the God he wants to be. Wouldn't it be cool to have a God like that? Who's just wants to be your everything. It's hard to talk about these 3 angels and the kind of God that we serve without having some kind of response, because that's what he wants. When he's talking to the Israelites, he wanted a response from them. Oh, that they would do something, anything, just to show that they're here and that they're responding to me. So I want to give you the same opportunity as well. If you get your phone out, you can scan the QR code. Hopefully it'll work. And there are three ways you can respond to what God said today. And these are the three options. First one's pretty simple. I just want to know God more. I just want to know him, know what he's like, know what he thinks, know what he likes, know what he doesn't like, know what he wants me to do with my life, the way I can obey. Second one is, I will practice the presence of God in my life. This is something I'm going to do this week. I'm going to commit to it and see what happens. And then the third one is I want to start praying for opportunities to reveal Jesus to someone I know. I want to pray for opportunities to be that one that can just share some wisdom, some advice, some good news of God with somebody as I run into them. And I also want to share with you some next steps you can take to make these not just decisions, but actions around those decisions too. First one is this. Same QR code, so you don't need to scan it again. I want to learn more about God and explore the Bible with someone. I just want to catch up with somebody and talk through what God is like and explore that with someone. Second one is send me a text message, email of the ways to practice the presence of God. If you don't remember them, if you want a hint or a reminder, we can shoot them out to you so that you've got them and you can choose one and you can get cracking with it this week. Third one is I'd like to learn how to share Jesus with someone I know. I want to know how to do this. I want to get involved in being one of these messengers before Jesus returns. And finally, if you've got some questions that might have been raised today or previously and you want to have a chat about them, then go for that. Tick that fourth box. And if you want contact, just leave your email or phone number and Jared or myself will definitely get in touch with you. You know, it's this first angel's message is actually pretty exciting because it invites us to engage in what God is doing in the world around us. It invites us to be the ones who he chooses to counteract the message of Revelation 13 and all that Satan's trying to do in the world around us. It's also exciting because the next thing that happens is Jesus comes back and we get to see him. And all of that stuff just fades away and it's no more. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty keen for that. I'll finally get 2 real new kidneys. We'll get to see people we've missed and lost. But we're going to get to see Jesus. We're going to get to be in God's presence and not be afraid and not fear. We're just going to get to be there with him. And man, that's going to be so cool. I can't wait for it. But for now, we've got work to do. And we've got a God to represent and a name to share.